Greetings, beloved creators. I trust you have found our series so far to be full of intriguing ideas. Has it brought up more questions than it has answered? If so, that's okay. Keep in mind that we are touching upon only the most basic of events and situations, and offering our perspective on the dance of duality as it has unfolded over millions of years. Some of you have been asking about the Orions and Draconians, Dracos. We have not gone into detail on these groups because it is not necessary. Suffice to say, our original DNA experiment sort of went astray, to use your earthly language. Other laboratory technicians and inventors came into the lab in the middle of the night and trashed our equipment and stole our samples and did their own experiments on them and started their own laboratories. Do you like our analogy? We have studied your language and customs for a long time and seem to know how to use the vernacular of your time to make our points. The Earth experiment can be best understood, however, if we continue our saga back in time to just after the destruction of Maldek. Over 10 million souls lost their bodies during the destruction of Maldek. Most of these souls took up residence on Mars, where a civilization was already in progress. The souls on Mars at that time were a product of our experimentation, along with groups from many different systems, including Orion and Alpha Draconis. Those groups left their mark many times along your evolutionary spiral, but never to a sufficient degree as to seriously alter your DNA blueprint, at least not yet. The souls from Maldek incarnated in the usual manner through among the Pleiadian, Orion, and Draconian lineage of Mars. The civilization on Mars grew significantly in numbers, until there were over 100 million souls. We will not go into the principles of soul fragmentation at this time, but suffice to say that the 10 million souls from Maldek fragmented into approximately 50% of the Mars population within a period of only a few thousand years. As the population grew on Mars, the fragile atmosphere became strained. Due to their distance from the Sun, both Mars and Maldek had thin and delicate atmospheres that could not take the strain of large populations, not to mention nuclear weapons. As the Mars civilization continued to grow, unrest between the various factions grew, especially since many of the Maldekian souls had not learned the lessons of war and had left their bodies suddenly during the catastrophic events there. Although most souls are counselled in between lifetimes, there was still a policy of non-interference, except to prevent another planetary explosion, and so Mars's inhabitants were pretty much left on their own, as long as they did not develop weapons sufficient to destroy the entire planet. The explosion of Maldek had altered the orbit of Mars and changed the EM frequency band significantly. The climate changed, and great canals were built to transport water from the tropical and polar regions into the desert intermediate zones. As the climate continued to become more unstable, wars broke out over water rights, and eventually conventional weapons began proliferating. A form of dirty atomic bombs were developed using heavy metals, uranium, plutonium, etc., and a war broke out using these weapons. Many souls were warned by members of the Brotherhood of Light, later the Confederation of Planets, and were assisted in building underground shelters and eventually underground cities. The Brotherhood and its related organizations neutralized many of the weapons to prevent a repeat of the Maldek experience. Nevertheless, the Martians blew holes in their atmosphere and severely disrupted the ecological balance to the point of rendering most surface life forms extinct. Some survivors of the atomic bomb blasts made their way underground and joined those already there. Once underground, they continued to rebuild their civilization until a new level of order emerged. Of the approximately 100 million surface souls, about 10 million survived and went underground. To prevent further attacks, the underground cities of Mars were sealed off from the outside world, and scientists managed to create an artificial environment capable of sustaining up to 20 million souls. Over time, great dust storms spread across the surface of Mars and eroded most of the cities and their architecture. Remaining to this day are a few pyramids and rectangular buildings, enough to remind your scientists that there was once life there, although such information has been suppressed from the populace. As for the underground cities, they still exist and are still inhabited to this day, but have evolved into fourth density and are not visible to most people who inquire. Your scientists will discover some radioactivity on Mars that cannot be explained solely by natural rock formations. This is the residue of the atomic explosions, since some of the elements used have a half-life of millions of years. What happened to the 90 million or so souls that did not go underground? You guessed it. They migrated to Earth and reincarnated into the melting pot of Pleiadian, Orion, Draconian, and other groups that had reorganized since the destruction of Pan. Today's discourse begins a new level of information that comes with a disclaimer. The material given in this discourse, and the ones that follow, is based on information that has been heavily suppressed by certain powers and influences that have been in control of your planet for a very long time. It is our intention to reveal the information that has been suppressed, and to do so in the clearest and most accurate way possible. We are not aware of any souls in earthly embodiment that have disseminated this information in the past with 100% accuracy. This is due to the difficulty involved in extracting the information from the Akashic records. Although all information in the universe is freely available to anyone who sincerely requests it, only those souls that are no longer able to be influenced by the councils of Rigel and the Draconian councils have been successful in getting through the system of distortion placed in the ethers about your planet. In some of your channeled writings, this etheric distortion is referred to as the frequency barrier. Until recently, we have not been allowed by the Godhead to tamper with this etheric distortion field. It has only been since about 1950 AD in your timeline that divine intervention has included the ability to remove etheric distortion fields from your planetary sphere. In later discourses, we will examine the levels of veiling put upon your vibratory sphere and the reasons for each veil. Some of the veils are a naturally occurring phenomenon related to the drop in vibration experienced by 7th density souls on their way to experience 3rd density reality. Others were placed intentionally by various benevolent factions in order to prevent the so-called dark forces from gaining too much power and thereby violating the free will of ascending souls. Other veils were placed intentionally by so-called dark forces in order to prevent ascending souls from gaining enough power to put an end to Orion, Draco, and Sirian involvement with Earth. Since there are apparently no earthly souls that have been able to extract all this information successfully, we caution that this channel may not be able to extract all the information. Sal, Rachel, and the founders make no guarantees of complete accuracy for any of the channeled information given here. We urge extreme discernment when viewing any channeled material, and would encourage you to be wary of any channeled material that claims to be 100% accurate. That said, we need to lay some groundwork for what is about to be discussed. The Luciferian Rebellion is discussed at length in some of your religious writings, including a highly distorted book called Urantia, that to the best of our knowledge was brought to Earth by the councils of Andromeda. The information contained in that book was offered by various entities in the Andromedan councils, who attempted to access the Akashic records during the period 10 million BC to the time of Jesus Christ. Some of the information is accurate and useful, but the Andromedan entities were unable to pierce some of the veils surrounding the period detailed in these discourses. Therefore, many of these entities relied on second-hand information given to them by various members of the Council of Betelgeuse and members of Sirius A and Sirius B, who were participants in the Earth experiment during the time periods covered herein. Many of the angels and ascended masters had accurate information pertaining to that time period, but were not allowed to disseminate the information due to violations of free will and non-interference. The energy transmissions of our group, the Founders, and several other high-density groups are sufficiently able to pierce all the veils, regardless of who or what put them in place. There are certain visualizations and DNA code patterns associated with the stargates and portals that must be accessed in order to pierce the veils. The ancient mystery schools existing at various times on your planet were set up primarily to move souls along the spiritual path, to the point of being able to access these stargates and portals. The system of initiations and rituals given through such secret and not so secret orders as the Brotherhood of Masons, the Rosy Cross, Rosicrucians, the Order of the White Rose, and the Order of the Purple Rose were for the express purpose of teaching souls to pierce the veils. In the beginning of these organizations, a number of souls attained knowledge of the stargates and portals and were able to pierce some of the veils. However, these souls were not evolved spiritually to the point of being able to remain pure in heart and mind, and many misused the information given. Due to lack of discernment, they gave the DNA codes to various negatively polarized ET groups, which enabled these groups to enter the stargates and portals and wreak havoc in the astral and etheric planes of Earth. These entities merged their DNA codes with the codes of evolving Earth souls, both directly through energy transmissions and through mass incarnations, thereby corrupting the original intent of the secret and not so secret mystical orders. All of the mystery schools mentioned above, and several others, have been infiltrated by negatively polarized ET factions, and as a result, the leaders of these organizations are controlled largely by the ego-based desire for power and control over others. This ego-based lust for power and control can be very devious and subtle, masquerading as one-upmanship and spiritual pride at having achieved this level or that level in the organization. With each level attained, the individual accumulates a greater degree of responsibility for the functioning of the organization and regulation of its members. This is especially dangerous when the ego is in charge. There have been numerous well-meaning world leaders who have gotten caught up in these negatively polarized energy fields, while still believing they are doing the work of God. This is one of the reasons certain elements of this information have not been revealed until this time. We, the Founders, are confident that there are now enough souls pure in heart and mind that would not, under any circumstances, misuse the information, that we are giving it through several channels at this time, including this one. We are not giving actual DNA code configurations during this current transmission. but we are giving the energy patterns necessary to pierce the veils. Some souls who attune to these messages will be sufficiently evolved to be able to pierce the veils directly. Others will need the proper DNA keys and codes, which will be given later. It is not our intent to withhold any information that is needed by your planetary lightworkers. However, even at our level of awareness and vibration, we have made what you would call errors of judgment in times past that partially led to the current situation on Earth. To the best of our knowledge, there are no ET groups or channeled entities that are immune to these errors of judgment. Free will is a complicated and challenging principle at all levels of evolution. While we thoroughly understand the mechanics of free will, we use the utmost caution and respect when making decisions that affect the free will of millions of Earth's souls. Up until about 1950 AD, there were virtually no controls in place to prevent the light and dark factions from battling it out to the bitter end. With the advent of nuclear weaponry, all that changed, and the Godhead issued the decree of divine intervention that most of you know about, allowing direct intervention in certain matters, when it was determined that such intervention would prevent the violation of free will of a large number of Earth souls. Once souls on your planet reach an inner vibratory rate of 5th density awareness, their well-being is protected by our dispensations, as carried out faithfully according to divine principle. One of your scientists, a Dr. Hawkins, devised a vibratory scale that is rather crude but somewhat useful, and we will use that scale to make our point here. Those souls whose inner calibration level is 500 or above, or whose outer calibration level is 400 or above, automatically enter a protective field of energy generated by our members and certain other high-density groups involved in implementing the divine dispensation. At this time, there are approximately 16 million souls on your planet vibrating at or above the levels indicated. Keep in mind, beloved creators, this is not a pecking order or device with which to feel more or less worthy. All of God's creations are worthy. Everyone on your planet deserves God's love. There is not one soul unworthy of being saved. Anyway, this is not about being saved. This is about being granted access to the stargates and portals necessary to assist humanity in breaking free of the effects of the Luciferian rebellion, which we shall discuss in a moment. Only those souls with pure minds and hearts are being allowed to access the sacred DNA keys and codes and enter the stargates and portals responsible for maintaining the veils of illusion on your planet. Any soul who sincerely desires to be free can and will be free. This is divine law. Ask and ye shall receive is as valid today as it was in the time of Jesus. However, there are certain safeguards built in to the ethers and astral regions of your planet that were necessary in order to respect the free will of souls evolving on your world. We will have more to say on this later, but at this point we will get on with your history. The pre-Lemurian period on your world corresponds roughly to 10 million BC until about 1 million BC. During that time, your world slowly recovered from the Great Flood, and life forms began to proliferate once again. After the destruction of Maldek and the atmosphere of Mars, many of those souls came to Earth and reincarnated, dramatically raising the population. Earth was once again mainly a tropical jungle, with about 90% water cover, and only the polar regions were cooled by comparison. Like attracts like, and as the souls from Maldek and Mars continued coming to Earth, the vibratory rate of Earth dropped to match their vibrations. When the awareness level of Earth dropped below 5th density, souls from neighbouring systems were able to access the stargates and portals surrounding Earth, which were not regulated at that time except by the law of attraction. Although the Orions and Draconians already had a foothold on Earth, they came by leaps and bounds once the vibration dropped below 5th density. This is the end of part 3. We are the founders.